The piercing alarm echoed through every corridor of Ravenwood estate. Self-destruct sequence initiated. 10 minutes remaining. Red emergency lights flashed across the walls. The guards glanced at one another in confusion. Several of them had never heard the alarm before. One guard stepped toward the chairman. "Sir, this wasn't part of the plan." The chairman never looked at him. "There is no plan anymore. There is only one rule. No evidence. No witnesses." James stared at him in disbelief. "You're willing to kill everyone?" The chairman answered without emotion. "History only remembers the victors. And I refuse to become a prisoner." Grace slowly stepped away from Edith. Tears were still running down her face. She looked directly at the man she had called father for 18 years. "I loved you. I trusted you. I would have done anything for you." The chairman lowered his eyes. "I know. Then why?" He looked back at her. "Because love is temporary. Power is forever." Grace shook her head. "No. Love is the only thing that lasts." Without another word, she tore the silver pendant from around her neck. It was the pendant the chairman had given her on her 16th birthday. She placed it gently on the floor. "I'm giving your name back. And I'm taking mine. My name is Grace Edith Williams." The chairman closed his eyes. For the briefest moment, regret flickered across his face. Then it disappeared. "So be it." He turned toward his guards. "Stop them." The guards raised their rifles. Before anyone could fire, the lights suddenly went out. Complete darkness swallowed the cellar. Gunshots echoed through the room. Someone shouted, "Power failure." Daniel immediately switched on his flashlight. "It's the emergency generator." James grabbed Edith's hand. "Stay close." Elizabeth pulled Grace beside her. "This way." They rushed through a narrow service passage hidden behind the wine racks. Behind them, chaos erupted. Some guards chased after them. Others tried to reach the control room to stop the self-destruct sequence. The chairman remained perfectly still, watching them disappear. A faint smile crossed his face. "They are going exactly where I wanted." Meanwhile, the four of them reached an underground laboratory unlike anything they had seen before. Rows of glass chambers lined the walls. Most were empty, but a few still contained old research equipment covered in dust. Grace looked around in horror. This was beneath my home." Elizabeth nodded sadly. "Yes. This is where Project Genesis truly began." Daniel stopped suddenly. "Wait." He pointed toward a large reinforced door at the far end of the laboratory. Above it were the words, "Archive Vault." James hurried over. The door had been left slightly open. Inside, thousands of paper files were stacked from floor to ceiling. Shelves filled with videotapes. Boxes of photographs. Original birth records. DNA samples. Every crime Project Genesis had ever committed. Daniel's eyes widened. "This is everything." They kept the originals. James looked at Elizabeth. "Victor said the evidence in the safe deposit box wasn't complete." She nodded. "This is the rest." Grace picked up one of the files. Her own photograph was attached to the front. Across the page, in bold red letters, were the words, "Property of Project Genesis." She slowly closed the file. "No. I'm not anyone's property." James placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "No. Your family." At that exact moment, the alarm changed. 5 minutes remaining. The floor beneath them trembled. Concrete dust fell from the ceiling. Daniel looked around desperately. "We can't carry all of this." James stared at the endless shelves. Then an idea struck him. The sprinkler system. Daniel frowned. What about it? If these records are paper, we don't need to carry every file. We only need to preserve them. He pointed toward the ceiling. The fire suppression system. If we activate it before the explosion, the records might survive long enough for investigators to recover them. Elizabeth smiled. Victor designed this archive. He installed a separate fireproof vault. The sprinklers seal it automatically. Grace looked at James. So we can save the evidence. And still escape. James nodded. We saved the truth. Daniel rushed toward the control panel. His fingers flew across the keyboard. A green light flashed. Archive protection activated. Massive steel shutters descended around the archive. Water poured from the ceiling. The fireproof vault sealed itself with a deafening clang. James smiled. Now even an explosion won't erase the truth. But before anyone could celebrate, a slow clap echoed from the entrance. The chairman stood there alone. No guards. No weapon. Just a small black pistol in his hand. He looked at Grace with quiet sadness. I gave you everything. Grace answered calmly. No. You gave me a lie. The chairman slowly raised the pistol. I won't let them take you from me. James immediately stepped in front of Grace. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. The chairman's finger tightened on the trigger. The alarm echoed once more. 4 minutes remaining. The final confrontation had begun. The chairman's finger rested on the trigger. The pistol never wavered. James stood between him and Grace, refusing to move. The emergency alarm continued to blare. 3 minutes and 45 seconds remaining. Dust drifted from the ceiling as another violent tremor shook the underground laboratory. The chairman sighed. I truly hoped it wouldn't end like this. James narrowed his eyes. Then lowered the gun. You still have a choice. The chairman gave a bitter smile. No, James. My choices ended a very long time ago. Grace stepped out from behind James. No. James reached for her. Grace, stay back. But she continued walking until only a few feet separated her from the chairman. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Grace whispered. When I was 6 years old, I had nightmares. You stayed beside my bed until I fell asleep. When I was 12, you taught me how to ride a horse. When I graduated, you said you were proud of me. Tears filled her eyes. Were any of those moments real? The chairman's hand trembled for the first time. They were. And every word I ever said to you, I meant. Grace's voice broke. Then don't become the monster they say you are. Come with us. Tell the truth. We can still stop this. For a brief second, the chairman actually seemed ready to surrender. His pistol lowered slightly. Then a voice crackled through his earpiece. Sir, federal teams have breached the eastern compound. They'll reach the laboratory in less than 2 minutes. His expression changed instantly. No. They'll never take me alive. He raised the pistol again. But before he could fire, Elizabeth stepped directly in front of James. No. A single gunshot echoed through the laboratory. Edith screamed. James caught Elizabeth as she collapsed into his arms. Blood spread across her jacket. Mom. James's voice cracked. Elizabeth smiled weakly. I'm all right. But everyone could see she wasn't. The chairman stared at the pistol in his hand as if he couldn't believe what he had done. His breathing became uneven. I never meant. Grace looked at him with tears streaming down her face. You shot the woman who loved her son enough to spend 15 years hiding just to protect him. You destroyed every chance you had to be forgiven. The chairman slowly backed away. No. This wasn't supposed to happen. The emergency alarm grew louder. 2 minutes remaining. Daniel pressed the cloth against Elizabeth's wound. We have to move now. James nodded. He gently lifted Elizabeth into his arms. We are getting you out of here. She weakly grabbed his sleeve. The west elevator. It leads directly to the surface. James looked toward the reinforced elevator doors. Daniel hurried to the control panel. It's still operational. The doors slid open. Just as they stepped inside, the chairman remained standing alone in the laboratory. Grace looked back one final time. Come with us. He smiled sadly. I don't deserve another chance. The elevator doors began to close. At the last second, the chairman reached into his pocket. He removed a small golden key. Then he tossed it toward James. James caught it. What is this? The master key. It opens every secure vault, including the final Genesis archive. James stared at him. Why are you giving this to me? The chairman looked at Grace. Because she deserves the truth. The elevator doors closed. As they began rising toward the surface, James watched the chairman disappear from view. For the first time, the old man looked completely alone. Back inside the laboratory, the chairman slowly sat down in the chair beside the archive vault. He picked up the silver pendant Grace had thrown away. Holding it tightly in his hand, he whispered, I always loved you. Even if I never knew how. The countdown reached its final seconds. 30 seconds remaining. Above ground, James, Edith, Grace, Daniel, and the wounded Elizabeth emerged from the hidden elevator just as federal agents rushed toward them. Everyone cleared the estate, an officer shouted. The ground began to shake violently. James turned back toward Ravenwood estate. For one silent moment, he thought he saw the chairman standing at an upstairs window, watching them leave. Then, a massive explosion ripped through the mansion. Flames burst into the night sky. The earth trembled beneath their feet. The headquarters of Project Genesis collapsed in on itself, disappearing beneath a cloud of smoke, fire, and shattered stone. An empire built on lies had finally fallen. But James looked down at the golden key in his hand. He knew one thing with absolute certainty. The explosion had destroyed a building. Not every secret. Somewhere, behind one final locked vault, the last chapter of Project Genesis was still waiting to be uncovered. The flames of Ravenwood estate burned through the night. Firefighters battled the inferno from every direction. Federal agents secured the perimeter as helicopters circled overhead. James stood silently, the golden key still clutched tightly in his hand. His eyes never left the burning ruins. Edith walked beside him. It's over. James slowly shook his head. No. He opened his hand and looked at the golden key. The chairman didn't save this for no reason. He wanted us to find something. Daniel approached carrying a tablet. The authorities have finished scanning Victor's journal. They found a reference we overlooked. James looked up. What reference? Daniel enlarged an old blueprint. Hidden beneath the original Genesis laboratory was another structure. Smaller. Older. Completely isolated from the rest of the estate. Across the blueprint were 3 handwritten words. Founder's Vault. Elizabeth, now lying on a medical stretcher with her shoulder bandaged, looked at the screen. I've heard of it. James turned toward her. You knew. She nodded weakly. Only as a rumor. Victor believed the founder kept his private records there. Daniel frowned. Then the golden key. Must open the vault. A federal commander stepped forward. The fire will continue for several hours. But our thermal scanners have detected an underground chamber that wasn't destroyed. James smiled faintly. Because it was built to survive. The commander nodded. We can reach it through an emergency access tunnel. Edith looked at James. Are we really doing this tonight? James answered without hesitation. We've come too far to stop now. An hour later. Escorted by a specialized rescue team. James, Edith, Grace, Daniel, and Elizabeth descended into the untouched underground chamber. Unlike the laboratories above, this place felt ancient. Stone walls. Iron doors. No modern technology. Only silence. At the end of the corridor stood a massive steel door. There was no keypad. No fingerprint scanner. Only a single golden keyhole. James looked at the key in his hand. This is it. He slowly inserted the key. For a moment. Nothing happened. Then a loud metallic click echoed through the chamber. The enormous door slowly swung open. Inside, they found a circular room unlike anything they had expected. There were no weapons. No laboratory equipment. No computers. Instead, the room resembled a private museum. Framed photographs covered every wall. Old journals rested inside glass cases. Children's drawings. Family portraits. Handwritten letters. Grace stepped closer to one of the photographs. Her eyes widened. This. She picked it up carefully. It showed the chairman as a young man. Standing beside a smiling woman. Holding a little girl no older than 5. Grace looked confused. Who are they? Elizabeth walked over. She stared at the photograph for several seconds before quietly answering. His family. James frowned. I thought he never had children. Elizabeth slowly shook her head. He did. They died. Daniel looked up. What? Elizabeth closed her eyes. 30 years ago. A car accident killed his wife and young daughter. The loss destroyed him. He became obsessed with defeating fate. That's when he secretly funded Project Genesis. Grace lowered the photograph. So, he stole me. Because he wanted another daughter. Elizabeth nodded sadly. Not because he hated you. Because he couldn't let go of the child he lost. Silence filled the vault. James walked to the center of the room. There, resting on a marble pedestal, was a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were the words. To Grace. Grace's hands trembled. He wrote this. James nodded. I think he always intended for you to find it. Very carefully. Grace broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter. She unfolded it. Her voice trembled as she began to read. My dearest Grace. If you are reading this, then I have failed. You now know that I was never your real father. For that lie. I ask for forgiveness I do not deserve. I stole your childhood because I could not survive the loss of my own. That decision became the greatest sin of my life. You owed me nothing. Yet you gave me love anyway. I hope one day you can remember not only the monster I became, but also the man who truly loved you. Tears streamed down Grace's face. She continued reading. There is one final truth you must know. Project Genesis was never my idea. Everyone in the room looked up. Grace's voice grew quieter. I was only the second chairman. James's heart skipped a beat. Daniel slowly whispered. What? Grace turned to the final page. Her hands began shaking uncontrollably. The founder is still alive. And if you have found this letter, he already knows where you are. At that exact moment, the heavy steel door behind them slammed shut. Every light inside the vault went dark. A calm, unfamiliar voice echoed through the darkness. Welcome. I've been waiting for you. The true mastermind had finally revealed himself. Absolute darkness swallowed the founder's vault. No one moved. The only sound was the steady breathing of the 5 people trapped inside. Then, soft light slowly illuminated the circular chamber. Not bright enough to reveal everything. Just enough to cast long shadows across the stone floor. The unfamiliar voice echoed once more. Please. Don't be afraid. James immediately stepped in front of Edith and Grace. Daniel scanned the room, searching for hidden doors. Who's there? The voice chuckled softly. You've spent months searching for me. And now, you're asking who I am. A section of the stone wall slowly rotated. An elderly man stepped into the room. He looked to be in his late 70s. He wore a simple grey suit. No bodyguards. No weapon. Only a wooden cane in one hand. His calm blue eyes studied each of them carefully. James frowned. You're the founder? The old man smiled. I've had many names. But yes. I created Project Genesis. Grace stared at him. So you're responsible? For everything? The old man sighed deeply. No. I'm responsible. For how it began. The monsters who came after me are responsible for what it became. Daniel folded his arms. That's convenient. The old man nodded. I expected you to say that. He slowly walked toward an old wooden desk in the center of the chamber. On it rested a thick leather journal. This is where the truth begins. James didn't move. I'm done listening to excuses. The old man looked directly into his eyes. Then listened to facts. He opened the journal. The first page contained dozens of newspaper clippings. Children suffering from rare genetic diseases. Families devastated by infertility. Hospitals overwhelmed. My wife was one of those patients. The old man's voice grew quieter. She couldn't have children. We spent years searching for hope. When medicine failed, I decided to create something better. Edith looked at him carefully. So Project Genesis began as medical research. Yes. We wanted cures. Better fertility treatments. Healthier pregnancies. Nothing more. Daniel interrupted. So when did it become kidnapping? The old man's face filled with regret. The day I trusted Victor Anderson. James froze. My father. The founder nodded. He was brilliant. He was ambitious. But he believed science should answer only to power. I disagreed. So he betrayed me. He convinced investors to remove me. I lost control of my own project. Grace looked stunned. So the chairman wasn't the first villain. No. He inherited a broken empire. And instead of destroying it, he expanded it. James clenched his fist. My father started all of this. Elizabeth quietly stepped forward. I warned Victor. I begged him to stop. He told me. History never remembers the sacrifices behind greatness. Silence filled the room. The founder slowly closed the journal. I've lived with my failure every day since then. James stared at him. If you knew all this, why didn't you stop them? The old man smiled sadly. I tried. I testified. I gathered evidence. I contacted governments. No one believed me. Victor owned the courts. The chairman owned the politicians. I became a ghost. Daniel narrowed his eyes. So why reveal yourself now? The founder reached into his coat pocket. He removed a small memory card. Because this contains something Victor could never erase. James accepted it cautiously. What's on it? The old man's voice became firm. The complete Genesis registry. Every experiment. Every victim. Every donor. Every child. Grace's breathing caught. Every child. The founder nodded. Thousands. James looked horrified. There were that many. I'm afraid. Many more. The room fell silent again. Then the founder looked directly at Grace. There is one name you must read first. He pointed toward the memory card. Yours. Grace slowly inserted the card into Daniel's tablet. The encrypted files unlocked instantly. A database appeared. Daniel typed. Grace Edith Williams. One file opened. Everyone leaned closer. Grace's adoption records. Her DNA profile. Medical history. Everything was there. Then Daniel noticed another tab. Genetic matches. He clicked it. The screen loaded. One result appeared. 99.98% match. Grace frowned. That's impossible. She already knew Edith was her mother. Then she looked at the name beneath the match. The color drained from her face. So, I've had a sibling. This whole time. James slowly read the name aloud. Subject G, 27. Nathan Williams. Edith gasped. Nathan. I was told he died at birth. The founder closed his eyes. No. He didn't die. He was taken. And unlike Grace, he was never allowed to leave Project Genesis. The room fell into stunned silence. Edith's knees nearly gave way. James caught her before she collapsed. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered. My son is alive. The founder gave a slow, solemn nod. Yes. And if we're not already too late. He's still waiting for someone to bring him home. Edith could no longer hold herself together. She fell into James's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. My son. I buried an empty grave. I mourned him for 18 years. And all this time, he was alive. James held her tightly. We'll find him. I promise. Grace wiped away her own tears and gently took Edith's hand. I'm not losing my brother. Not after we finally found each other. The founder watched them silently. His expression was filled with regret. There isn't much time. Daniel looked up from the tablet. Why? The founder pointed to the screen. The Genesis registry is still connected to a hidden satellite network. The moment we accessed Nathan's file, someone else was notified. James frowned. Who? The founder answered quietly. The custodian. Grace looked confused. The custodian. The founder nodded. When the chairman realized he was dying, he transferred control of the remaining Genesis facilities to one final person. Someone even I have never met. Daniel quickly searched the database. Thousands of encrypted records appeared. Most were marked. Closed. Others read. Destroyed. But one file remained active. Its status flashed in red. Facility Omega. James looked at the founder. What's Facility Omega? The old man's face grew pale. The last operational Genesis center. The place where every surviving experiment was taken. Grace whispered. And Nathan is there. The founder nodded. If he's still alive, that's where you'll find him. Daniel zoomed in on the location data. It's hidden. The coordinates are encrypted. James clenched his jaw. Can you decrypt them? Daniel smiled faintly. I'll try. His fingers flew across the keyboard. One layer of encryption disappeared. Then another. Finally, a map slowly appeared. Everyone stared at the screen. Edith frowned. No. That can't be right. James looked closer. The coordinates pointed to an isolated island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. There were no roads. No cities. No visible buildings. Just dense forest surrounded by cliffs. Daniel whispered. They built an entire facility where no one would ever think to look. The founder nodded. Facility Omega was designed to disappear. It doesn't officially exist. Grace looked at James. How do we even get there? Before anyone could answer, the tablet suddenly emitted a sharp warning tone. Remote connection detected. Daniel's eyes widened. Someone's accessing the registry. A message slowly appeared on the screen. Hello, James Anderson. No one spoke. Another line appeared. I was wondering when you'd find Omega. James felt a chill run down his spine. The message continued typing by itself. If you want to save Nathan, come alone. If you bring the government, every subject in Omega will die. Edith covered her mouth. Grace shook her head. It's a trap. James continued reading. One final sentence appeared. You have 72 hours. The screen suddenly went black. Then a live video feed replaced the message. A young man wearing a grey medical uniform stood inside a brightly lit room. He looked to be about 18 years old. His eyes were exactly like Edith's. He slowly looked into the camera, as though he could somehow see them. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, I don't know who keeps sending me these dreams. But if my mother is still alive, I want her to know. I never stopped waiting. Edith let out a heartbreaking cry. Nathan. James stared at the screen with determination burning in his eyes. He had rescued Grace. He had exposed Project Genesis. He had destroyed its headquarters. But the greatest mission of his life was only just beginning. Somewhere on a forgotten island, a son was still waiting for his family to come home. No one in the vault could speak. Nathan's face remained frozen on the dark tablet screen. Edith reached out with trembling fingers, gently touching his image as if she could somehow hold him. My baby. You've grown into a man. Grace wrapped her arms around her mother. We are bringing him home. No matter what stands in our way. James looked at the founder. You said we have 72 hours. What happens after that? The old man took a slow, painful breath. Facility Omega was never designed to keep people alive forever. It was designed to erase every trace of Project Genesis. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? The founder lowered his eyes. If the custodian believes the facility has been compromised, he'll activate Protocol Zero. Grace looked at him. Protocol Zero. The founder's voice became heavy. It destroys the entire island. Silence swept through the room. Edith stared at him in horror. You mean Nathan would die? The founder nodded. And so would every remaining survivor. Daniel immediately reopened the Genesis registry. There has to be another way. He searched through hundreds of classified files. Then one encrypted folder caught his attention. Omega personnel. He opened it. A list of names appeared. Scientists. Doctors. Security officers. Then one photograph made everyone freeze. James leaned closer. No. Grace covered her mouth. That can't be. The photograph belonged to Daniel Brooks. Daniel stepped backward. What? James slowly turned the tablet toward him. The screen clearly displayed Dr. Daniel Brooks, Senior Systems Architect, Facility Omega. Daniel's face turned pale. No. That's impossible. I've never been there. The founder looked carefully at the file. Then his expression changed. They used your identity. Daniel frowned. What are you talking about? The founder pointed to the personnel record. Look at the date. Daniel did. The employment record had been created 26 years earlier. He whispered. I wasn't even born. James immediately understood. They cloned his identity. The founder nodded. No. They cloned his father's. Daniel's breathing became uneven. My father. The founder slowly closed his eyes. Dr. Michael Brooks. He was one of my brightest engineers. Daniel stared at him. My father died before I was born. So I was told. The founder spoke quietly. He didn't die. He disappeared. He refused to continue the experiments. So Victor had him declared dead. Daniel felt as if the ground had vanished beneath him. My entire life was another lie. James placed a hand on his shoulder. We'll find him too. Daniel nodded silently. The founder looked at the clock. You have less than 70 hours now. James turned toward the federal commander waiting outside the vault. We need transportation. The commander answered immediately. A military aircraft can have you in the Atlantic by morning. James shook his head. The custodian said no government. If they detect military movement, Nathan dies. Grace looked at James. So how do we get there? Before anyone could answer, Elizabeth quietly reached into her coat pocket. I know someone. Everyone looked at her. She smiled faintly. Years ago, Victor forced a naval captain to smuggle Genesis equipment across the Atlantic. He later disappeared. James frowned. And Elizabeth handed him a faded business card. He didn't disappear. He changed his name. He owes me his life. James read the card. Captain Samuel Reed. The Seagulls Charter Company. Daniel looked surprised. A civilian captain. Elizabeth nodded. He knows every hidden route across the Atlantic. And he never asks questions. James folded the card carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Then that's our next destination. Grace looked once more at Nathan's frozen image on the tablet. Hold on, brother. We are coming. As the group walked out of the founder's vault, none of them noticed the tiny red light blinking high in one corner of the ceiling. A hidden camera. Miles away. On a dark island surrounded by violent waves. A man dressed entirely in white watched the live surveillance feed. His face remained hidden. Only his cold grey eyes were visible. He smiled as James and the others disappeared from the screen. Then he pressed a single button on his desk. Across Facility Omega, warning lights began flashing. A computerized voice echoed through the underground complex. Subject N01 has been selected for final preparation. Inside a small room, Nathan looked up from his bed as the steel door slowly opened. Several armed guards stepped inside. One of them spoke calmly. Nathan. It's time. Nathan frowned. Time for what? The guard answered without emotion. To meet the reason you were created. Far below the island. In the deepest level of Facility Omega. A massive steel chamber slowly unlocked. Something inside moved. Then, a pair of piercing blue eyes opened in the darkness. The final secret of Project Genesis had just awakened.